Hey humans, it's Hannah. Welcome back to the second channel and happy Halloween if you are watching this on the day that it's posted. Happy Halloween and welcome to day 7 of your 7 days of Halloween on this channel. Drop in the comments, let me know what you guys are doing tonight. If this is still Halloween and you're watching this, let me know what you're doing because I love knowing what other people's plans are. I think I'm just going to be watching movies and passing out candy to the 3 or 4 trick-or-treaters that I get every year. I might go to a party on Saturday, but I don't have a ton of plans. But honestly, I'm okay with that. I love just staying home and watching movies too, so haven't decided yet. Might do something, but yeah. Okay, let's get right into it for today. This first story starts, "Hi Hannah, I'm a recent viewer of your channel and I love all your videos. The personal scary stories others have told on this channel inspired me to share the closest thing I've had to a paranormal encounter. This story is very long and there's a lot of parts to it, and it also includes some other possible explanations at the end, though I would love your input too. I would also like to remain anonymous to protect the privacy of my family members. Before I get into the story, I'd like to say that my aunt was a wonderful woman. She was funny, smart, and kind to everyone she met. She was sort of a wild child, and my parents loved to tell me crazy stories about her. They still quote the hilarious things that she would say, and in the same high-pitched tone that she'd speak in. More than anything, she was a loving mother, wife, aunt, and friend. My aunt, however, had lots of personal issues, which to this day we're unsure if it was attributed to undiagnosed mental illness or paranoia caused by her alcoholism and weed addiction. She was very anxious that she would die at the age of 30 because she was the same age that her mom died at. She did live past this age, but not by very much. She also claimed to see angels who would visit her frequently. She would then dress my cousins as the angels she saw, take pictures of them in these costumes, and leave the photographs lying around the house in random places. These were a few of the many unexplainable things that she did. One day, she and my uncle got into a drunken fight, although I don't know what caused it. All I know is that she was extremely angry at my uncle, and because of her intoxication, she could not be reasoned with. At one point in their argument, she ran downstairs to the ground floor and started scribbling furiously all over the walls in black Sharpie. She wrote all kinds of swears, curses, and other mean things at my uncle that covered the walls, floor, and ceiling. When my uncle caught her doing this, she ran to her car and drove off. Oh my goodness. That must be so hard to watch a family member go through that. It sounds like some mental health issues along with the other stuff. There's a stretch of road near my uncle's house that goes on for a mile in a straight line before it ends in a sudden sharp turn. Anyone who is not careful can easily drive over the edge just before the turn, and unfortunately my aunt was one of those people. She drove at high speed down this road, and right as she reached the turn, she kept going. Her car drove over a ditch and rolled over multiple times. By the time my uncle found her, she was already gone. Oh my God. After she was pronounced dead, my uncle called my parents to tell them what happened. The next day after work, my dad drove straight to my uncle's house to see him. He told my dad that he took my cousins to stay at his parents' house for the night, but my dad was welcome to stay in the house until he came back the next morning. Since my uncle lives in a different state, the car ride took 12 hours, and my dad arrived just after 3 o'clock in the morning. It was also raining outside. Right away, my dad could tell something was off. My uncle's dogs were howling and barking from the moment that he pulled into the driveway. When he stepped inside the house, he said that he felt like there was electricity in the air, the same feeling you'd get when you stand too close to a power line, like a vibration. While the dogs were going crazy, my uncle's cats were relatively calm. One of the cats walked up to my dad, dropped a dead mouse at his feet, and smiled at him. According to him, it was not a cartoonish Cheshire cat smile, but a very noticeable human-like grin. In telling this story to me, he was very insistent that it smiled at him. Despite the obvious alarm bells, my dad made the brilliant decision to go downstairs to the ground floor to see the writing my aunt had left all over the walls. The sight of it all, the terrifying writing, the rain on the windows casting ominous shadow droplets, the photos of my cousins dressed as angels scattered everywhere. It was too much for my dad, and he got the hell out of there, driving to where my uncle was staying for the night and falling asleep in his car in the driveway. A few days later, my mom joined my dad once she was able to get the time off of work and find someone to babysit my brother and me for the weekend. After spending some time with my uncle for a few hours, my dad drove her out to the crash site so she could pay her condolences to my aunt. It was nighttime, and since this is a relatively rural area of the state, there were no houses or buildings nearby or cars driving past at this hour. It was also a calm night with no wind. My mom walked a few hundred feet out into the field where the crash happened while my dad stayed by the car watching her. She said that she was sorry for my aunt for meeting such a tragic end, and she would always remember the memories they made together, and said her final goodbyes. As she was done talking, a strong gust of wind picked up and passed by her, or according to my mom, passed through her. She suddenly got goosebumps only on the side of her body that the wind passed through and nowhere else. When she walked back to the car, she noticed that none of the nearby trees were rustling around to indicate any sort of wind. She then asked my dad if he felt any wind, to which he said no. My mom still believes that this was my aunt saying goodbye to her as well. While at my uncle's house, my parents stayed in the guest bedroom on the ground floor. The room was positioned at the end of the hallway, and you could look out the door and see the entirety of a very long, creepy hallway. The following night, while my parents were trying to sleep, one of my uncle's dogs came into the room around midnight to sleep in the bed with them. A few minutes later, it suddenly got up, walked to the door, and began growling at it. This is where my parents' stories became inconsistent. My mom says that the dog just growled at the door, then after a few minutes climbed back into bed with them and fell asleep. My dad, however, said that when the dog got up to growl at the door, a red light appeared in the hallway. It lingered there for a few minutes before disappearing, and then the dog crawled back into bed with them. If my dad's account is true, it wouldn't be possible for anyone else in the house to cause that, since no one would have been sleeping on the ground floor or have any reason to go downstairs in the middle of the night. The next morning, my uncle told my parents that he woke up in the middle of the night to see my aunt hovering above him, staring at him. I'm not sure what else happened after that, but it was a creepy experience for everyone. For a while after my aunt's death, unusual things would happen in the house, though none of them were anything major to note, mostly just bad vibes. The creepiest thing that happened, however, was that the writing my aunt left on the wall would never go away. My uncle applied several coats of paint over the walls, at least 20 coats of paint, according to him, and every single time the writing would bleed through the paint, bold and clear as ever, as though it was never painted over at all. These creepy things continued for nearly 2 years. Eventually, my uncle found another woman whom he started dating, an old girlfriend that he had before marrying my aunt. Once they announced their relationship, everything stopped. There was no more weird occurrences in the house, and they finally painted over the writing on the wall. My uncle still lives in the same house, and I visit him at least once a year. I have never experienced anything paranormal or relatively creepy in the slightest, nor have he or my cousins reported anything supernatural either. I do, however, like to freak myself out by going to the ground floor and trying to imagine what my dad saw the night that my aunt died. This is where the paranormal story ends. The next part is some possible explanations to the story that I've thought about over the years. Once again, I'm open to any input that you may have, as I love hearing illogical reasonings to these supernatural occurrences. One thing I will say first, my parents did not make up this story to scare me. I told the same story to my friends, and their immediate response was that my parents had been pulling my leg. I am absolutely positive that this is not the case. For one, I was around 14 when they told me this story, meaning I was too old to be scared by ghost stories like this. Additionally, both of my parents are huge skeptics and believe everything has a rational explanation. My dad doesn't like horror stories of any kinds, as he thinks they're stupid, and he makes fun of them all the time too. My mom does enjoy ghost stories, but she sees them merely as fictional stories created for entertainment and not as definitive proof of ghosts. When they tell me this story, they don't share it like it's a spooky, scary campfire tale. They tell it like they would with with any family story, like one you'd hear about how grandma met grandpa or how your ancestor was a brave soldier. It doesn't make sense for them to make up this story, then tell it so seriously and earnestly. Finally, it'd be a bit fucked up for them to make up a ghost story about a relative who passed away so tragically. My aunt doesn't deserve that, and my parents would never treat her death like a joke. With the belief that my parents are telling the truth, I have a few logical interpretations of their story. My uncle seeing my aunt hovering above him could easily be explained by either lucid dreaming or sleep paralysis, and since I don't know the exact details of what he saw, it very much could have been paralysis. The dogs barking when my dad arrived at my uncle's house the night that my aunt died could just be normal dog behavior. They sense anyone pulling up to their house, whether it be the owner or a stranger, they'll start going crazy. While I believe that he saw a cat smiling at him, that could be a trick of the light or the pareidolia effect. It was night. He was creeped out. His imagination was probably running wild, and he saw what looked like a smile. The dog growling at the door is a little more indicative of something paranormal, but again, that's just how dogs are. The dogs might have sensed an animal outside or was growling at it. I am more convinced that the red light my dad saw was something paranormal. The only possible explanation I can think of is that a car passed by the house and that their car light shone in at just the right time, but since it lingered for several minutes, that wouldn't make any sense. Also, like I mentioned earlier, it's unlikely that it'd be something else in the house since no one else stayed on the ground floor and no one would have any reason to go to the ground floor in the middle of the night. Similarly, I think that the gust of wind my mom felt was more paranormal than not. I've heard stories from people who have gone to haunted locations that experienced a similar phenomenon where it felt like the wind passed right through their body despite no wind being present and leaving goosebumps on the side where it went through. The only explanation is that there probably was wind that night and my mom just didn't notice. When she asked my dad if there was wind and he responded no, he could have misheard her question and replied to what he thought he heard. My dad is hard of hearing, so this happens quite frequently. What I cannot find any logical explanation to is the writing on the wall bleeding through the coats of paint. I was not there to see it, so I cannot definitively say that it was something paranormal, but it's very bizarre that something like that could ever happen. Additionally, it's such a specific and unique detail in this whole case that I highly doubt my parents or my uncle could have fabricated or misremembered it. There's a possibility that it could be a chemical reaction and the Sharpie ink just bleeds through the paint, but I don't know the science behind that, nor if it's even true. I also don't know how it could continue to bleed through the paint for almost 2 years, then finally disappear once every other paranormal thing stopped too. This part of the story has left me stumped for years. I'm also not sure about the electricity my dad felt when he arrived at the house. He might have just been anxious. Again, my parents are huge skeptics, but over the years, they have never found a logical explanation for what happened. My mom tries to pull the story in a lighter context, believing that because my aunt died angry and in such a tragic way, her soul became restless and could not move on. It was only when she saw my uncle accept her passing and find love again that she was able to find peace. If ghosts are real, I believe that this is likely what happened. If not, then I don't know what else it could be. I was going to say that actually. You read my mind, that I thought it does sound very much like your aunt was sticking around while your uncle was grieving her, but then once he found love again, or once he moved on, then she was able to kind of pass on, or she felt like she was just like, I don't really need to bug him anymore because he doesn't need me anymore. And that's my entire story. I'm very sorry it was so long, but it's been something that I've wanted to share for years with some sort of explanation as to what happened. Love your channel. Can't wait to watch more scary story videos. P.S. In case it was confusing at any point, my aunt and uncle are not blood related to me. My uncle is my dad's best friend. That's why I say my aunt/uncle's parents instead of my grandparents in the story. That is very helpful. It's like an uncle, not your literal parent's brother. Anyway, okay. Thank you so much for the story. I do love having some longer stories in here. The paint thing, the only logical explanation I can think of is that your uncle was not portraying it correctly, or he was seeing it, he was exaggerating a little bit, or like in his mind, like he kept seeing the writing through the paint because it was so traumatic for him. And then if you never saw it yourself, it's just really hard to know what really happened with the writing on the wall. You know, did he really put 20 layers of paint over it, or was he exaggerating that part? Did he put the wrong type of paint over it that was too sheer, that wasn't going to cover Sharpie like that? I also do find it interesting that I think I would try to remove the Sharpie. A lot of Sharpie comes off with rubbing alcohol, just FYI, or hand sanitizer, just FYI, little life hack for you. So I do find that interesting, but like maybe when he was able to paint over it, he used a different kind of paint or a different color of paint or just a different brand of paint. And so it finally worked. Like maybe the brand he was using was not working well. Again, that's assuming he was maybe exaggerating a tiny bit or misremembering, because he said that he could see it clear as the first day it was put on there through the layers of paint. So yeah, that's my best guess for that one. I don't really have other explanations or offerings for the other stories. The cats, I do think cats are just kind of haunted in general, and that's no shade to cats. I love cats. That's one of my favorite things about cats, is that I kind of low-key think that they can all interact with the spirit world. I don't think it would make sense that it was your aunt, because that was kind of the implication, because you already had the cat, right? And he saw the cat the night that she passed away. Like, how would she have gotten to the cat? I don't know. Like, I just personally think that cats are just weird, and cats will just look very, very proud of themselves when they give you a mouse. Like, they are like, why wouldn't you want this dead animal? Like, that's an honor to them for you to for them to bring you their prey. So I do believe that cats can kind of smile or smirk in a way in certain situations. All that being said, I do think that it's completely possible. Like I said, I do kind of believe in ghosts now. I'm just skeptical about most TikTok stories or ghost stories or things that go viral online. But for the most part, I do kind of believe in something. I don't know if it's specifically ghosts or if it's something else that we just don't understand, but it does very much sound like her energy was still there, and that like the wind and the light like could have been her. So I don't know. So I don't know. I personally buy this one. Again, there might be logical explanations for some things, but not everything. So very interesting. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I loved it. Very, very long and very spooky. We have a few very much longer stories in my script here. We might not get through 5 stories today. Just FYI, we might end at 4. We'll see where we're at around what the time is. Okay, the next story starts, "Hi Hannah. In the latest episode, there was a person who shared their face stories and I wanted to hear more. Well, here's mine. I was in high school and my best friend at the time was staying the night. She was laying in my bed. I assumed to sleep, and I was laying on the air mattress on the floor. I couldn't sleep, absolutely wide awake, and I was slowly losing my ADHD mind trying to be still and quiet. But then I looked at the ceiling and something crazy started to form, sort of like if you've ever watched a photo develop. It had glowing eyes like stars and what looked like a crown of smaller stars around the top of its head. It seemed feminine, the size of an average person, but it had straight up dragonfly wings. It was like the shadow with hints of color and detail, like long brown robe-like dress that she was wearing. She just stared at me for a good 20 minutes and then faded away again. Like I always do when I see something paranormal, I thought, wow, minds are weird, and figured that it wasn't real. It was the first paranormal experience I'd had and seemed so over the top that it had to be my mind. Except the next morning, my friend was scared and she immediately asked if I'd seen the woman on the ceiling with wings and glowing eyes last night. It blew my absolute fucking mind. To be clear, I didn't tell her anything. I'm not a sleep talker, nor then and not now. Neither was she. We had both just independently saw the same thing, and while I wrote it off, she was laying there too terrified to even call my name. I had another handful of weirder fae experiences in my late 30s, not that I knew what it was at the time. The first time I saw it, I was stepping out of my room holding my bird on one finger. Suddenly a ball of what I can only describe as hair came rolling down the hallway right between my feet into my room, then vanished. It wasn't solid, sort of halfway see-through and about the size of a tennis ball. It was so crazy, and it appeared from time to time around the house, always full zoom, always hairy. I decided to go to the local occult store to see if I could figure out what it was. The first book that I grabbed was on fairies, and when I opened it, a random page, it described an almost identical encounter, a rolling ball of hair, had by someone in the late 1800s to early 1900s in what I believe the UK. It's been a while since I read it, but I was absolutely floored. The paranormal is a lot weirder than people realize. Best, and thank you for all your wonderful videos. Angela, they, them. Thank you, Angela. What the hell? I don't know. I have no notes on that one. I'm just going to take that one at face value and let you guys all decide for yourselves. What, yeah, the hairball, like a weird hairball. What do you mean? That's what it sounds like, is a ghost hairball. Has anybody else experienced that? Wow. Very bizarre. Okay, the next story starts, "Hi Hannah, love your channels, and I thought I'd submit a scary story in case you find it interesting. I was telling a coworker about a series of strange Ouija board incidents that happened when I was a kid, and after seeing their horrified reactions, figured it might be worth sending your way. I realize after typing it out that it's kind of on the long side, but it gets increasingly scary as it goes." Ooh, yay, I'm here for it. Love Ouija board stories. I love Ouija boards, as you can tell from all the planchettes I have back there. I collect them now, I've decided. So also perfect for Halloween. For context, it started in 1996 when I was 10 years old. I've always been kind of a morbid kid who always had wanted to read horror folklore and especially books of true accounts of ghosts and hauntings. But I became absolutely obsessive about it after my grandfather died of cancer in late 1995. Now, in a deviation from literally every other Ouija board story I had ever heard, I was not raised to believe that using Ouija boards was in any way dangerous or required any kind of ritualistic element. To be clear, my mom absolutely believed that they were real and was the one who got me the board and encouraged me to use it. Her rationale, and I'm not kidding, was if a ghost wants to get you, it's going to get you. It doesn't need your permission. Okay, Mom, jeez. So in the summer of 1996, my best friend Samantha was over at my house for a sleepover. We had used the board before and thought it was fun, but hadn't had any really compelling results. We decided to use the boards in the morning before her mom came to pick her up. It was pretty quick that the board started giving us messages. I can't recall exactly what it was saying at first, but it was more complex than usual, giving answers longer than one word, enough to get us a little weirded out. We asked the board how we could know it was real. It responded by saying Edwin, which was completely baffling to us. It could have been a ghost named Edwin, but we'd have no way of knowing that, so that wouldn't really answer the question. I had never met anyone with that name, but Samantha mentioned that she had known a kid named Edwin in the second grade when her family lived in Canada before moving to where we were in California. So that didn't seem relevant, and so we just shrugged it off. About a half hour later, Samantha's mom arrived to pick her up. When she saw Samantha, the first thing she said was, "Guess who I just saw at the store? Remember your friend Edwin from your old school?" The two of us looked at each other with the expression of pure WTF. I asked her when she saw him, and she said that it had been about 30 minutes ago, right when the name popped up on the board. Samantha and I started excitedly explaining what happened, and as we did, my mom's face blanched. She was pointed to a remote-controlled toy car sitting on the kitchen table. She had given it to my grandfather when he was sick, just so that he could have something fun to do while he laid up in bed. It had stopped working completely, and she had it sitting on the table as a reminder to try and fix it. It didn't have any batteries in it, and neither did the controller, which was in an entirely different room. At the exact time the board was giving us the name Edwin, and Samantha's mom saw Edwin at the store, my mom was standing in the kitchen and watched as the RC car suddenly started up, went flying off the table, and made a right turn and crashed down the stairs. It wasn't scary, but it was definitely a big something extremely weird just happened moment. The scary stuff happened a few years later. My family had moved away from my dad's job, and I was a pretty sullen 13-year-old at that point, and more morbid and obsessive over this stuff than ever. I made some new friends and quickly got the reputation for being a spooky ghost girl and constantly got invited to sleepovers with the mandate that I bring the Ouija board with me. Lots of creepy stuff happened, nothing huge, but enough to get even the more skeptical kids pretty freaked out. One night, I had my two closest friends over to my house, and of course we ended up in my room using the Ouija board. We started getting responses that were unusually hostile and threatening. I believed wholeheartedly that it was real, but it didn't scare me because, well, if something evil wants to get me, then it would, whether or not I talk to it, right? If I'm being honest, I was actually pretty argumentative with it. Asked to prove itself, the board said that it would hurt or kill someone we knew. We asked who, and it said Jonas, who was a kid in our grade at school, but who we weren't close with. We asked how, and it said water. It was specific enough that one of my friends got scared and wanted to stop. So we did. And no, I didn't do any of that closing the portal sort of thing. Just stop talking to the board. Oh my God. Oh no. Come Monday, Jonas wasn't at school, and he wasn't there Tuesday or Wednesday either. My friends were absolutely losing their minds at that point, but he was back at school the next day on crutches and with a huge cast on his leg. Thank God. I was so scared that this was going to be about a kid dying and the Ouija board predicting it, and it made me want to scream. Okay. Apparently, his mom had lost control of her car and accidentally crashed into a local pond less than an hour after the Ouija board had threatened him. Fortunately, the rest of her family was uninjured, but that made it feel even less like a coincidence. We were pretty much convinced that we made that happen, and one of my friends completely noped out of any more Ouija board sessions after that. The event that finally got everybody else to quit happened a couple months later. In the interim, I was getting that same hostile, threatening response every time I used the board. If it were a horror movie, everybody would be yelling at the screen to stop using the damn board, but I was more fascinated by it than ever and started doing pretty much everything I could to try to encourage even more extreme results. Why? What are you doing? Stop it. Stop it. I am that person screaming at you to stop. A couple months later, it was my friend Alice's birthday, and we had a big sleepover party with 8 or 9 other girls. We pulled out the Ouija board and almost immediately started getting those hostile, scary responses, and the other girls were getting a bit freaked out by the way that I was kind of egging it on. Suddenly, a glass jar fell off the top of a kitchen cabinet and smashed onto the floor, despite the fact that no one had been in that room for hours and that the jar was a decoration that had been up there for years. As Alice was cleaning it up, I noticed a metallic taste in my mouth, and everybody absolutely lost their shit when I put my hand to my mouth and it was covered with blood when I pulled it away. I spent a while in the bathroom trying to get it to stop, and once I did and looked in the mirror, I swear, I am not making this up, there was one long, clean cut running right down the center of my tongue. It wasn't particularly bad cut or anything. Tongues are just those body parts that bleed a lot. I was honestly elated and thought that it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. But it's probably not surprising that absolutely nobody else wanted to be anywhere near that Ouija board after that. I know that this sounds like a total load of BS, and I would have a really hard time believing it if I had heard it from someone else. But I swear that every bit of it really happened. It's pretty much the only thing that keeps me from being a complete skeptic, just because I can't explain away something I experienced myself. Thanks. And that was from Laura. Laura, do you still have this Ouija board? Can you please send me a picture of it? If you still have it, send me a picture. And also, like, why aren't you filming these Ouija board sessions? That is so... Thank God that poor kid didn't die, though. It's like whoever is talking to you through the Ouija board is like messing with you, but like not, or like predicting things, but not. It's like it has a little bit of a conscience, whatever it is. It's like not good. It's not a happy, nice spirit, whatever it is, but it's also not like completely psychotic. So bizarre, though. I hate that story. What the hell? That is so creepy. Oh my God. We need more. We need all the details. We need a picture. Okay, and I think this is going to be our last story for today. This is going to be story number 4, but this is a pretty long story as well. Dear Hannah, hello from the Netherlands. My name is Sigo, she, her, and there's no need to keep me anonymous. This is the second story that I'm sending in. Originally, I wanted to tell both stories in one email, but I realized that I rambled way too much and it would probably be way too long. This story is about my possible UAP sighting, as I heard you say in a previous video that you're curious about them. Let me start off by saying that I do believe in aliens. I just don't really believe that they'd come to Earth or anything like that. Same, I agree. I think most abduction stories can be explained, and sightings are often just military aircraft. Same, agreed. This being said, though, I still have a hard time figuring out what I saw 4 nights in a row and then never since. Some context before I start off, I live in a very small suburban town in the Netherlands. My house has 3 floors and my bedroom is on the 2nd floor where I can see right into my neighbor's yard. We also have a clear view of the city way off in the distance, mostly bright lights and stuff. This will be relevant later. The first thing people often say when I say I'm from the Netherlands is if I garden, because apparently that's one of the biggest biggest stereotypes about my country, especially Amsterdam, even though that's not where I live. I'm happy to say that I do, within reason, and these 4 nights where I saw these strange things were on nights where I smoke. I'm not the type of person to, nor have I ever hallucinated on marijuana, and I also know that it's very rare. That being said, I know there's going to be people saying that the sightings can be explained by what I was smoking at the time. It's okay if that's your opinion, but I know how I am when I smoke, as I'm relatively experienced and have never experienced anything like this. All the impact that it had on my sightings was me just being more attentive. I would agree with that. Obviously, I'm not an expert, and I know that in very, very rare cases, it can do some really, really, really bizarre things to people. But as a gardener myself, if you don't do that, it's not like you aren't aware of what's going on. It doesn't make you like not be able to respond to an emergency. It doesn't make you see things or hear things or anything like that. Everything that I remember everything that happens the night before, like the next day, perfectly fine. It's just that you kind of giggle at yourself because you because everything's heightened in a way, like they said, more attentive. But yeah, it's not like doesn't cause hallucinations or anything like that. I live really close by an airport, so I often see planes coming overhead. I have this app where I can check what kind of plane it is when I'm sat in my windowsill late at night, and I often check it. Then the first night I saw a plane that was moving way too fast to be a plane that I would normally see. It turned out to be a military aircraft, which is already weird because once again, I live in a small town and I've never heard of anyone seeing these, let alone seeing one for myself. The other things I saw, however, were definitely not. At the time, I was chatting with ChatGPT because I thought it would be funny to convince the AI that I was actually seeing a UAP. I started off the conversation with, I think I just saw a UAP, but I know that it probably isn't. What could it be? To which it responded with the typical options. Now, I know ChatGPT is a very weird alibi to use, but I thought that it was at least worth mentioning that after reporting everything I saw that night, I successfully convinced it that I saw something unidentified. I remember after the military aircraft left, it was about 45 minutes until I saw something else. I remember how long it was because I just finished one of your viewer scary story videos. What I saw is best described as a star that's way too bright, only it wasn't. It was a blue/white light circulating in the same spot in the air for about 10 minutes. I thought that it was a star at first, but it seemed so strange that it would be moving like that. What's even weirder is after those 5 minutes of me just staring at it, it suddenly disappeared. I tried pointing my phone at the lights I saw to try and check if it was a star or an aircraft, but it didn't turn up anything either. This is the point where ChatGPT heavily started suggesting drones. I had never seen someone fly a drone in my life, but that could just be me. It seems strange to me that someone would be operating a drone past midnight in a random small neighborhood, but I am open to the possibility. I am 100% sure, though, that it is not a plane because, as I mentioned before, I often see those and it just did not look nor act like a plane at all. After I was sure that it was gone, I turned back to my phone only to see it appear in the sky once again. This time, it was moving faster, again in that circular motion before disappearing again. It was also where ChatGPT suggested that it may be space debris, which calmed me down a bit. I don't think I was scared, but I was definitely confused and most of all excited because this was so abnormal. This might be unrelated, but as I'm scrolling through my chat with the AI, I remember that I heard a cow moo out of nowhere. I know this sounds crazy and really random, but I distinctly know it was a cow's moo. It is unlikely anyone was outside playing the noise as all the lights were off in the neighboring houses. I live about a half-hour walk away from a really dense forest, so maybe a cow could have been in there, but it still seems far-fetched to me, though I am open to the possible explanations, such as the fact that the sound carries strangely at night. All I know for sure is that there was no way a random cow just walked around my neighborhood. Let's also keep in mind that I hang out in my windowsill multiple nights a week and to either smoke or do whatever, and I have never heard a cow again. The next night I was in my windowsill again when an entirely different spot there was a flashing red light in the sky. At that point I thought it was a plane, but that thought quickly withered away when it was still there in the exact same position 15 minutes later. and now had started flashing red and blue, kind of like a cop car, only it was in the sky. ChatGPT suggested that it may be a satellite, and I'm unsure of how to check if it really was, but it's also strange that if it is a satellite, that I never saw it since. I hope you're still with me on this because I know this story is confusing. It's confusing to me too. The red-blue flashing light slowly turned into a white light again, and it turned into a sort of white stripe with a white light surrounding it. It was really far away, so I didn't see it too clearly, but I distinctly remember a blue light surrounding the solid white stripe, sort of like an aura. This is where ChatGPT seriously started asking more questions and suggesting UAPs, which gave me quite the chuckle. The whole thing lasted about 2 hours until I went back inside. I've just realized that this email is getting to be quite long, and I'm only on night 2 of everything that happened. If you ever end up sharing this in a video, or even if you don't, I'm still happy I got to share it. I will definitely send an email of what happened the other 2 nights, including when it started getting larger and seemingly closer towards me, which did freak me out quite a bit, or at least more than the random disembodied cow I heard did. I hope I don't sound too insane here. Like I said, I highly doubt that this was an actual alien experience and accept that it could have been a weird chain of events, but it still fascinates me enough to share it with you. Hope you have a lovely day. Much love, Seago. Thank you, Seago. Hear me out. Is it possible that we've seen this on TikTok videos before? Is it possible? I know that you live like way out far away, like you said, the city's very far away, but is it possible that there was a mountain or a hill in the distance where you saw these lights go down? So is it possible that there's like hilly or a big mountain way further off in the distance? We've seen this in TikTok videos before, because if it's really, really dark, or if it's foggy, or if the weather is weird that day, sometimes cars sitting on the top of hills in the distance with their lights on look like they're in the air. We've seen this before where it looks like cars literally like Ron's car in the second Harry Potter book flying off and taking off. It looks like a car flying in the air, but it's not. It's just that you can't see the mountain/hill, like doesn't contrast with the background enough. So it kind of looks like it's flying up. That would also explain the red lights and the blue lights, because if it was a cop over there with their lights on, it would explain like the different weird light patterns. And then is somebody sitting at the top of the hill for a long time with their lights on, or flashing their lights, or their car broke down, or they're moving the car just slightly, something like that. Is that possible? Just something to think about. It's very, very hard for me to say that, obviously, without being there, without seeing from the angle that you're seeing. And then, as you mentioned yourself, I could absolutely see this also being drones. If you are looking for logical explanations, maybe this was just drones of people flying their drones, especially if the city was in the distance. Somebody could have been flying drones as well. So I'm not sure exactly what happened, but what a bizarre thing to experience. I do wish, please, if this happens again, please take a video or a picture or something, even if it's a really shitty video. If you can get any sort of indication, it might give people, it might help you a little bit more to give you more clues as to what might have happened, because yeah, that is extremely weird. But thank you so much for your story, Sika. Yeah, let us know in the comments if you guys have other explanations. Also, the other weird part is that there's just not a lot of UAP and UFO sightings in the Netherlands. Like, often it seems to be concentrated to particular parts of the world. But of course, you know, there's exceptions to every rule. And of course, there are still sightings all around the world. So who knows? I would be curious to know if this continued to happen, or if things got better or worse, or if things got weirder, or if you never saw them again. Okay, guys, that is going to be it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching the whole week, if you watched, or even if you watched a few days or whatever. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope that this was a fun little like extra boost. Obviously, I can't make, my other videos on the main channel are so long form and research heavy and require a ton of editing. And so obviously I cannot do a daily video on my main channel, I think, ever, but it's fun to have a channel where I can do this sometimes, or just post stuff literally mostly just for fun. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. I hope you have a very, very happy and safe, please be safe. Have a good Halloween. Okay, bye.